On the rejected media segment of this channel, which we do in sort of episodic format, we take a look at ideas that were either scrapped, canceled, or maybe they were deleted. You know, sometimes it can be deleted scenes, sometimes it can be something as simple as a change to an origin story. And that's what we're taking a look at today, because Fox, when it comes to their X-Men films, they changed a lot. Now, I personally am very partial to the X-Men films. I grew up with these movies. They actually were one of the things that stoked my interest in superheroes. And whether you're the biggest X-Men comic book fan or not, I do think that it's hard to argue that these movies didn't have a big impact on like superhero cinema existing. These movies, the Keaton Batman era, and I would say the Raimi Spider-Man era, these were some of the things that solidified the age of live-action superhero adaptations, for better or worse, because sometimes they would change a major element of a character that people would not agree with or appreciate. One of those was going to happen to Wolverine for Fox's X-Men. Now, you might already know that Wolverine in the comics, he's a notoriously short king, if you will. He's not tall. And Hugh Jackman is very different from that. He is tall. So that's already a very big change and departure that they went with, that comic book nerds will argue about until the end of time and be frustrated with. But what if I told you that originally Hugh Jackman's Wolverine wasn't even going to be Canadian, a staple of the character since his original inception and debut all the way back in the 70s? That's something we're going to take a look at today. What if Wolverine was an American? An idea that was actually almost gone with, unfortunately. It's a dark time in history, and there is an actual reason why this matters. So, let's take a look at it today. Before we hop into it, if you enjoy the video, you want to leave, like, subscribe, I appreciate that very much. I have an Amazon affiliate link where I will have lots of Marvel, DC, all kinds of other stuff. You buy something there, we get a small commission. I appreciate that immensely, and I do have a question of the day for you, which is, what is your least favorite or most favorite change in a live-action superhero film? So, for example, if you love that Wolverine is tall or it pisses you off, let me know what that is and why. Or if you love a change or adaptation to an origin story or hate it, let me know what that is and why. There are a lot to pick from. Superhero adaptations often change quite a bit, again, for better or worse. Now, what's interesting about this is it was actually revealed in an interview with Inverse, and this was revealed by a legend of voice acting and writing who people often forget is an amazing writer, and that is David Hayter. If the name might be familiar to you, you might know it because I talk about him all the time on this channel, or you might know it because he is the voice of Snake, Solid Snake, and even Naked Snake in many of the Metal Gear games. David Hayter brought that to life in the English versions of the game. But David Hayter is also a renowned screenwriter, and when speaking to Inverse, he revealed this dystopian, dark Days of Future Past-esque future that we could have found ourselves in, where originally they wanted to make Wolverine an American. One statement he shared was, "By the way, one of the proudest moments I had on the first film was when I was called into one of the producers' offices, and they said to me, 'Hey, can we just find Wolverine in Alaska instead of Alberta and just make him American?' I knew this was coming, but I was ready. I told him, everybody knows that Wolverine is Canadian and the fans will kill you. I had no power in this situation, but I stood my ground and he stayed Canadian. Now, I don't like to call myself a true Canadian hero, though. I'll leave that to others." And he went on to talk also a little bit in this same interview, saying that even though he had, worked so much on X1 and 2, and honestly, those two movies had some of the better scripts out of the early X-Men movies, especially compared to 3, he revealed that, of course, we all got fired after X2 because Fox wanted to reach some arbitrary date, essentially, for the movie releases after that. I watched all the movies, though, because X-Men was a huge part of my life. Some elements afterwards were great, and some were not so great. I really loved X-Men Days of Future Past, and Logan, I thought, was epic. It was everything we wanted to do back in the day, but couldn't because it was PG-13. And I find this interesting as well because Hayter did reveal, essentially here, one of the things that we know about, which is that they were working with almost a hands-tied mentality. I mean, even when you look back at the Fox movies, there was a hands-are-tied mentality around having even something like outfits. You know, even with jokes being made about, well, what would you prefer, yellow spandex? Things like that, right? These were movies that obviously people like David Hayter were fans of the source material and they were doing their best with, but producers didn't care. They were embarrassed in a way that this was a superhero movie. They wanted the X-Men to almost be like an elite special forces unit, not really superheroes. And I think that that's pretty obvious from how the movies were treated. Now that said, when you have someone like Hayter at the reins of some of the screenwriting, even though he didn't have that much power, putting his foot down and preventing this, it is something that avoided a huge, I guess I would say, mischaracterization of the character. Now, at the end of the day, would it be that huge of a deal if Wolverine was an American instead of a Canadian? I mean, they're both North America, right? They're real close to each other. I mean, hey, I'm in Minnesota. We just get called Diet Canada. That said, I do think this is a big deal because it's kind of insulting to the origins of the character. Oh, well, should Spider-Man not be from New York? How about we find him in Britain? I mean, like, do you see how silly these things are? Obviously, some characters are going to be more tied to a location than others. For example, Wakanda with Black Panther is obviously a very, very crucial element. Whereas Spider-Man in New York, even though I'd argue it's a crucial element if you tried to say, well, he was born in Mexico and he lives in New York now, it's like you could do that, but I would ask you why? Like, what is the point of changing this? Putting Hugh Jackman in the role of this character, I would personally argue, is because he was a good actor, right? He was good at the role. So you can do something like The Height, and I guess you can kind of work around it. A lot of people weren't a fan of it. I get that. That's fine. You can have that preference, and I respect it. But for me, I couldn't imagine growing up without the Hugh Jackman Wolverine. He's a character that immensely impacted my life. I even made a video in the past talking about how much this character means to me, how much his appearances mean to me. Basically, it's a character I love. But if you were to make this character American, I also think you lose a little bit of what makes him unique. You know, obviously North America is a continent, so in that way he's still American. But when you take a character from Canada, a country that doesn't have that many representatives in the superhero world already compared to the United States of America, I'm kind of wondering why you're pulling out of a less full cookie jar. You know, like you're taking something from them where they already don't have as much. Now, I'm not saying that in the sense of like Canada is pathetic in the Marvel universe, but like every superhero feels like they're from New York, or at the very least the United States. I mean, most of those superheroes and characters, they focus on that country, the same way that a lot of anime and manga, they'll focus on Japan or some kind of fictionalized version of Japan, because that's where they're from. So you already had such a wide cast of characters that are from America. You're now going to take one of the other key leading features of Wolverine. Like, a lot of his leading features are, he's fierce, he's animalistic, he has a lot of trauma, he's a short king, and he's from Canada. There's more to him than that, but you already pulled out he's short, and now you're gonna pull out he's from Canada? I mean, how many things are you gonna pull out of the character before he's not the same at all? And, you know, something that was even mentioned as well by a Screen Rant article covering this and some of the other ones covering this is that this does actually basically dilute his uniqueness, and it severs a cultural connection to that area. If you're from Canada, you're going to care more that Wolverine is from Canada because you're going to have a pride in that representative of your part of the world. The same way that someone in Queens might really like that Spider-Man matters in Queens. It's like, it's a point of pride. I know they're fake characters, but it is a point of pride for the people who live there, and it just feels unnecessary. I don't think it would have added anything, and all this would have done is taken away from a beloved character and added to the mountain of changes that Fox made to the X-Men. Look, I can ignore a lot of changes Fox made to X-Men, and one of the reasons I can is because I grew up more on those movies than on X-Men comics, which I got into later because of the films. To me, the films were almost a gateway into being interested in X-Men comics. These films and the X-Men Evolution cartoon. Those were kind of my gateway to even caring about who the X-Men were. But there are a lot of people who had the opposite angle. They had the opposite approach on this. They grew up on these comics. They grew up on knowing that source material. And how many things did Fox already change from that source material drastically that this would have just gone on top of the pile? I think that David Hayter putting his foot down, standing there and saying, hey, look, this is a dumb change, it adds nothing to the character, and people will be mad, was ultimately for the best. And thankfully, it was one of the few times that the Fox universe didn't get to change some core element of a character and screw with it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I love to hear your thoughts on this, and I'd love to hear other things you want covered on Rejected Media. This one was a little more straightforward, a little less, of a unique deep dive into all of this different information, but still something I cared about nonetheless. If you want to support this channel, we have a Fortnite code you can use, DJAY123, helps support us a lot if you make a purchase on that game. We also have our store, CosmoBunny.shop, where we have coasters, keychains, trays, and more from recycled paper, manga, comics, magazines. Basically, they're damaged. So what we do is we take those from local stores at a very deep discount or for free. If they're really damaged, we save some of the paper, save some of the transformative stuff. We actually transform that through a new artistic medium into this resin pieces, essentially, and we recycle the rest. So it matters a lot to us. We appreciate you. We hope you enjoy that and check it out. We've gotten some more sales lately, and thank you to those of you who have. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.